My own family made me die inside. When they discovered the fruit growing within me, my father looked into my eyes and said, "You and that abomination won't tarnish our name." That night, he did something I could never have imagined. "Oh, my dears, what a blessing to find you today. My name is Amaryllis Thornfield, I'm 76 years old, and I live in this blessed little town called Crystal Springs in the heart of Kentucky. It's not where I was born, but it's where I found peace after so much torment. Today, I'm known as the Water Witch, but don't be alarmed by that nickname. It's because I'm the only senior citizen diver who explores the crystal-clear depths of the springs around Crystal Springs. Just imagine, a 76-year-old woman diving in underwater caves, photographing colorful fish, and helping preserve this natural paradise. I never imagined that in my 70s I'd be swimming among schools of fish and underwater caves with an oxygen tank on my back. I started diving a few years after arriving here in Crystal Springs, when I was in my early 30s. It was my son-in-law, a diving instructor, who insisted I try it. "Mother-in-law, you need to see what exists beneath these waters," he would say. At first, I thought it was crazy. I barely knew how to swim properly. But when I put on the mask for the first time and saw that hidden world, with its impossible colors and fish that looked like living jewels, it was like being born again. Today, besides diving 3 times a week, I give talks at schools about the importance of preserving our rivers. The children love it when I show my underwater videos and tell them about the secrets that the waters hold. Tourists are amazed when they see me coming out of the river with all my equipment. Some even ask to take photos with me, can you believe it? A little old lady with white hair emerging from the waters with an oxygen tank on her back. My house is close to the Blue River, on a small but cozy farm. The walls are all decorated with my underwater photographs, each with a story to tell. There's one of a giant bass that swam so close it almost hit my mask, one of a young water snake lazily moving among the aquatic plants, and my favorite, the record of a secret cave I discovered during an expedition with blue stalactites that no one had photographed before. My deepest dive was 100 feet last year. The doctor nearly had a fit when he found out, but all my tests are in order. "You have the heart of a 50-year-old, he said, amazed. I always answer, "That's because I left my sorrows on the surface, doctor." And you, my dear ones watching me now, tell me here in the comments. From which little town are you watching? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with coffee, after lunch, or already at night with the stars in the sky? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from, and when you take a little time out of your day to listen to the stories of this diving grandma here. Tell me, okay? Let's create a chain of caring. Today, I want to share with you a story that I've kept in the depths of my soul, just as the waters keep their secrets. A story about pain, but also about strength. About how sometimes we need to drown in despair before learning to swim against the current of life. It's not easy to talk about certain things, but as folks around here say, still water grows stagnant. And perhaps, by telling my story, I can help someone who's feeling drowned by life's problems. I'll go back in time, to when I was just a girl, living in eastern Kentucky, in a place so different from this Crystal Springs that welcomed me. A place where silence weighed more than any word spoken aloud. I was born in Riverton, on the border with West Virginia, in 1949. A time when Appalachia was still a mystery to many outsiders, but for us, it was our backyard. Our family lived in a simple brick house, painted light yellow, with a large yard in the back where my father raised some chickens and grew vegetables. The roof was red clay. The dark wooden windows creaked when the strong wind blew. The wooden floor made noise when we stepped on it, as if the house was always telling stories. My father, Isaiah Thornfield, was a border customs officer. A tall man, with a rigid posture as if he were still in the army, where he served for 10 years before getting the customs job. He had small brown eyes, always alert, and a thick mustache that he trimmed with military precision every morning. He dressed impeccably even in the suffocating heat of Riverton, always in dress pants and a long-sleeved shirt. He was respected in town, some out of admiration, most out of fear. My mother, Eliza Thornfield, was the opposite. Delicate, soft-spoken, always with a colorful scarf tied in her black hair. She came from a family of immigrants who crossed the border during the war. She was a primary school teacher, but stopped teaching when she got married, because my father said that a decent family woman doesn't work outside the home. She obeyed everything silently, with a sad smile that seemed permanently sewn onto her face. My brother Garrison was 4 years older than me. From a young age, he was my father's pride. He had the same posture, the same way of walking. By 10, he already knew how to shoot, fish, and ride a horse like a man. He was the son my father wanted to follow in his footsteps. As for me, a girl, I was a necessary accident, as I once heard my father say to a customs colleague when they were drinking bourbon on the porch. Our routine started early. The church bell rang at 5, and my mother was already up, lighting the wood stove to make coffee and breakfast, fried potatoes with eggs that we ate before sunrise. My father left for work at 6, always with his revolver on his belt and a leather briefcase under his arm. Garrison went to school in the morning, and I in the afternoon. While at home, I helped my mother with household chores. I learned early on to wash clothes in the cement basin in the backyard, to iron with a hot iron, to cook the typical dishes of the region: cornbread, soup beans, the apple stack cake we learned from the neighbors. My mother spoke little while we worked, but she would hum songs in her native language that I never fully understood. Sundays were special. We all went to the White Oak Baptist Church, me in my starched dress, my brother in pants and suspenders, my parents elegant as if they were going to an important event. Afterwards, we had lunch at home, or rarely, visited a relative or family friend. My games were limited. Girls don't mix, my father would say. I had some cloth dolls that my mother made, and I played alone in the yard, making up stories for them. Sometimes, when my father wasn't around, my mother would let the neighbor's daughter, Olivia, come play with me. We would make little houses with maple leaves and colored pebbles that we collected by the riverbank. The Ohio River was where I truly felt free. On Sundays, occasionally, my mother would take me to wet my feet in the shallow banks, while the men fished further out. The muddy, warm water was like an embrace, and I would watch the boats passing by loaded with goods, imagining where they were going and what existed beyond that border I could see on the other side. It was in the year I turned 9 that things began to change. Garrison, at 13, was becoming a young man. My father decided it was time for him to become a real man, and began taking him everywhere, to the customs office, on longer fishing trips, even to nights out with friends in the port area that everyone knew about, but no one mentioned. My brother started changing. The boy who sometimes played with me in secret, who gave me fruits he picked from the neighbor's orchard, was transforming. His gaze began to look like my father's, hard, cold. He started giving me orders as if he suddenly had authority over me. Bring me water, polish my shoes, shut up, women don't have opinions. They were the same phrases my father used with my mother, and when I complained, he would say, "Daddy told me to practice for when I have my own house." One night, I woke up to screams in the living room. It was my mother crying and my father yelling. "You're raising the girl to be rebellious. You see what happens when you don't obey me? Do you want her to end up like the Armstrong girl?" I don't know who the Armstrong girl was, but from my father's tone of voice, she must have done something terrible. The next day, my mother had a black eye, but she smiled as if nothing had happened. She said she had hit the corner of the table. It was the first of many excuses I heard over the years. I was 11 when I noticed the way Garrison began to look at me. It was no longer the look of a brother. It was something that made me feel dirty, as if there was mud stuck to my skin that wouldn't come off even after scrubbing hard. I started locking my bedroom door at night, pushing a chair under the doorknob. One afternoon, coming back from school, I passed by the living room and heard my father talking to Garrison. A man has his needs, son. And sometimes, when there's no way to satisfy them outside, you have to find a way at home. My heart froze. I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I knew it was something bad. Very bad. That same night, I put my chair at the door, as I always did. But in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of the chair being dragged. The door opened slowly, and Garrison's silhouette appeared against the faint light coming from the street. "If you scream, Dad will kill you and Mom," he said in a low voice. What happened next, I've kept in such a deep place in my mind that sometimes it seems like it happened to someone else, not me. An 11-year-old girl who died that night, so that another could survive. In the morning, I washed myself so hard in the yard basin that my skin turned red. My mother saw my silent tears, the scratches on my arms, the way I could barely walk. She hugged me tightly and cried with me, but said nothing. At that moment, I understood that she knew. Maybe she always knew this would happen. The nights became a recurring nightmare. I tried to stay awake, prayed to the Lord, silently begged for help. But no one came to save me. Not even my mother, who once whispered, "Hold on tight, my daughter. One day you'll be able to leave here." I couldn't. That's how I entered adolescence, carrying a secret that weighed more than the whole world on my girl shoulders. The years that followed were an endless nightmare. Between the ages of 11 and 13, I lived divided into two Amaryllises. The one everyone saw, the quiet, obedient girl who helped her mother, went to school and church on Sundays, and the other who only existed at night when my bedroom door opened. This second Amaryllis was slowly dying, like a plant without light. Garrison, now 17, was finishing school and preparing to follow a military career, as my father always wanted. "A future army officer," my father would boast to the neighbors at Mr. Oliver's store. "Military blood doesn't fail." Meanwhile, my mother was wasting away like a candle slowly consuming itself, increasingly thin, more silent. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with tears in her eyes. Other times, when we were alone in the kitchen, she would hold my hands and whisper, "Remember the story of Moses that the teacher told at school? God always prepares a way through the waters, my daughter. Have faith." I couldn't understand how God could allow what was happening in that house. On the nights when the nightmare repeated itself, I closed my eyes and imagined I was diving in the Ohio River, letting the current take me far away to a place where nobody knew me or could hurt me. It was during this time that I met Miss Harriet, a lady who sold medicinal herbs at the town market. My mother sent me to buy peppermint and lemon balm to make tea, as she had been having terrible insomnia. Miss Harriet, with her white hair always covered by a colorful scarf and wrinkled hands that smelled of rosemary, looked deep into my eyes when I went to her stand. "The body gets sick when the soul is suffering, child," she told me, putting an extra handful of lemon balm in the paper bag. "Come back here next week. I have something for you." I don't know why, but I trusted her. Maybe it was her kind look, maybe the desperation of having no one else to turn to. The following week, I went back. She gave me a small dark glass bottle. "This is rosemary oil with Appalachian herbs. Put it on your wrists and behind your ears before sleeping. It keeps nightmares and evil spirits away," she explained, squeezing my hand. "And if you need to talk, I'm here every Wednesday and Saturday." The oil had a strong, earthy, and slightly sweet smell. I didn't really believe it would work against evil spirits. My evil spirit had a name and surname after all. But I started using it anyway, hiding the bottle under my mattress. For a few weeks, miraculously, the nightly visits decreased. Garrison complained about the smell when he approached, said it was hillbilly stink. This gave me a small relief, a chance to breathe. It was during this period that I began to feel changes in my body. My menstruation, which had started just over a year ago, stopped coming. My breasts became sore. In the morning, a terrible nausea made me run to the yard and vomit hidden behind the basin. At first, I thought I was sick, maybe with some mountain fever. But as the weeks passed, A cold fear began to grow inside me. I remembered the whispered conversations I heard among older women at the market about girls who got lost and had to leave town in a hurry, about bellies that grew and brought shame to families. I began to look at myself in the broken piece of mirror I had in my room, lifting my nightgown to see if my belly was different. One afternoon, washing clothes with my mother, I fainted. When I woke up, she was passing a damp cloth on my forehead, her eyes filled with a sadness I had never seen before. "Mom, I think I'm sick," I said, my voice trembling. She held my hand tightly. "How long has it been since you bled, daughter?" The question confirmed my worst fear. The whole world seemed to collapse on me. "Almost 3 months," I answered in a thread of a voice. My mother closed her eyes as if she had taken a physical blow. "My God, what did we do to deserve such punishment?" she murmured, more to herself than to me. That night, she came to my room when everyone was asleep. She sat on the edge of my bed and said in a low voice, "Amaryllis, you're expecting a child." The words fell like stones on my chest. A child. A life growing inside me. The fruit of that horror. I was 13 years old and barely understood what was happening to my body. "What are we going to do, Mom?" I asked, tears silently flowing. "There are some women in town who know how to resolve this kind of problem," she said, hesitantly. "But it's dangerous. Many girls don't survive." For a moment I thought maybe that was the solution, not to survive, to end it all at once. But something inside me, an instinct I didn't know I had, made me reject this idea. "Your father can't know," my mother continued. "He would kill you both. And Garrison—" "It was him," I said, finally finding the courage to say it out loud. "It was Garrison, Mom. All those nights." My mother covered her mouth with her hands, as if to stifle a scream. "I know, my daughter, I know. God forgive me, but I always knew and couldn't do anything. But now we have to find a way." In the days that followed, we lived in a state of constant terror. My mother tried to hide my morning sickness, gave me looser clothes to wear. I started missing school, saying I had mountain fever. Meanwhile, we whispered about what to do. "I have a cousin in Louisville," my mother said. "Maybe she'll take you in for a while. We can say you went to study there." But deep down, we knew we couldn't do this without money, without my father's permission. We were trapped. It was Miss Harriet who gave us hope. When my mother went to buy herbs to calm the nerves, she ended up confiding in her. The old lady listened in silence and then said, "Bring the girl here tomorrow. I have some acquaintances who can help." The next day, we went together to the market. Miss Harriet took us to the back of her small house, which was near the port. There, she introduced us to a couple, Mr. Theodore and Mrs. Zenith. They were boat operators, transporting goods down the Ohio River to Cincinnati and other cities. "They can take the girl," explained Miss Harriet. "They have relatives in Cincinnati who can shelter her until the baby is born. Afterwards, they decide what to do." It was a risky plan, but it seemed our only chance. The problem was how to leave the house without raising suspicions. My mother decided that we would have to tell my father about the pregnancy, not about who the father of the child was, but say that I had gotten involved with some boy from school. "He'll be furious. He'll punish you, but he won't kill you in front of witnesses," she reasoned. "When he leaves for work, we escape." The idea terrified me, but I saw no other way out. It was with my heart in my throat that, on a Friday night, after dinner, my mother asked to speak with my father in the living room. She called me and Garrison, too. "Isaiah," she began, her voice trembling, "I have something serious to tell you about Amaryllis." My father raised his eyes from the newspaper, irritated by the interruption. "What has this girl done now?" She's expecting a child." The silence that followed was like the heavy air before a storm in the mountains. My father remained motionless, his face slowly changing color, from normal to red, then almost purple. "What?" he finally said, his voice low and dangerous. Amaryllis is pregnant, my mother repeated, holding my hand tightly. My father rose slowly, like a panther preparing to attack. He looked at me with a hatred that made me freeze to the bone. "Who was it?" he asked. "Which bastard did this to you?" I couldn't speak. Fear had frozen my voice. My mother squeezed my hand, a silent sign that I shouldn't tell the truth. But before either of us could answer, Garrison, who had turned as pale as paper, stood up too. "Father," he said, his voice strangely calm, "the fault is mine." The silence that took over the room was as if time had stopped. My father looked at Garrison as if he didn't recognize his own son. My mother let out a low moan, squeezing my hand so hard it hurt. "What did you say?" my father asked in a dangerous whisper. Garrison held his gaze. There was something strange in my brother's eyes. It wasn't remorse, nor shame. It was almost pride. "She's mine," he said, in a tone that made my stomach turn. "She always has been." What happened next was so fast, I barely had time to understand. My father lunged at Garrison with an animal roar, grabbing him by the shirt collar. "You bastard! You monster!" With each word, he shook my brother violently. Garrison didn't react, just smiled in a way that gave me chills. "You taught me, Father. A man has his needs, remember?" My father threw him against the wall with such force that the portrait of Jesus fell and broke. Then he turned to me and my mother, his face disfigured by rage. "You two," he said, pointing a trembling finger. "You allowed this, in my house, under my roof." My mother stood up, putting herself in front of me. "Isaiah, the girl is a victim. She's only 13 years old. Please, think." The slap my father gave my mother echoed in the room like a gunshot. She fell back into the chair, her lip bleeding. I screamed, trying to protect her, but my father grabbed me by the arm, dragging me out of the room. "Father, please," I begged, trying to break free. "I did nothing wrong." "Shut up," he shouted, dragging me down the hallway to the back of the house where the cellar was. It was a dark and damp place that he used to store tools and the contraband boxes he sometimes brought from the border. "I'm going to resolve this once and for all. This shame will not taint our family name." He opened the heavy wooden door and pushed me down the stairs. I fell hard on the dirt floor, feeling a sharp pain in my arm. From above, my father looked at me with eyes that had nothing human left in them. "You and that thing inside you won't leave here," he said, his voice ice cold. "God willing, neither of you will see the light of day again." The door slammed, plunging me into almost complete darkness. I heard the sound of the lock and then his footsteps moving away. I lay there on the damp floor, crying silently, one hand over my still flat belly. I don't know how much time passed. It could have been hours or days. The darkness was almost total, except for a tiny crack in the wall that let in a thread of light. The cellar smelled of mold and something I recognized as the kerosene my father used in the lanterns. From time to time, I heard muffled screams coming from the house, my mother's voice pleading, sounds of things breaking. Then silence. I felt around the floor, trying to find something, anything that could help me. My fingers touched cold objects, tools, empty cans, pieces of rope. I crawled until I found a less damp corner and curled up there, shivering with cold and fear. "Mom," I whispered into the darkness, "help me, please." I don't know when I fell asleep, but I woke up to the sound of the lock being moved. The door opened, and the faint light of a lantern illuminated the cellar. It was my mother, her face swollen from crying, a dark bruise around her eye. "My daughter," she whispered, descending the stairs with difficulty. "It has to be quick. He left to get Pastor Ansel. He wants you to confess your sins before... She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I understood what my father was planning. Panic dominated me for an instant, but then came a strange calm, almost supernatural. I brought a little food and water, my mother said, placing a bundle on the floor beside me. And this. She gave me a small rusty key. It's for the back door of the cellar, which leads to the yard. Your father doesn't remember it. It's been locked for years. The lock is rusty. It will be hard to open. I looked at the key, then at my mother. Come with me, I begged. She shook her head, tears flowing. I can't. He would kill us both. And Garrison. What happened to him? I asked without really caring. Your father tied him up in his room. He's going to send him to the army tomorrow, said they'll straighten out what he ruined. She held my hands. Listen, you need to go to the port. Find Miss Harriet. She'll be waiting. Mr. Theodore will take you on his boat tonight. And you? What will happen to you? My mother smiled sadly. I'll be fine. When your father returns, I'll say I came to pray for your soul, and when he discovers you've escaped. She shuddered. Well, it won't be the first time he takes out his anger on me. Mom, no. Go, my daughter. Live. For you and for this child who is not to blame for anything. She hugged me tightly, as if she wanted to imprint on me her smell, her warmth. Then she stood up with difficulty. Wait until he leaves again, she instructed. He'll go get the police when the pastor arrives. That will be your moment. With one last look, she climbed the stairs and closed the door, leaving the lantern with me. I heard the lock being placed again, an act to keep my father from suspecting. I ate a bit of the bread and dried meat she brought, drank the water. Then I began to examine the cellar more carefully, looking for the back door she mentioned. I found it hidden behind some stacked boxes. It was small, more like a hatch, and was nailed with boards. Using a rusty screwdriver I found among the tools, I began to work on the boards, trying not to make noise. My fingers bled with the effort, but I didn't stop. Each nail that came out was a step closer to freedom. Finally, after what seemed like hours, I managed to remove all the boards. The door was there, small and old. The key went into the lock, but wouldn't turn. I tried to force it, but it was completely rusted. Despair began to dominate me again. I looked around, searching for some solution. My eyes fell on the kerosene from the lantern. I remembered my father saying it was good for loosening rust. I poured some of the liquid into the lock, praying it would work. I waited a few minutes and tried the key again. This time, with a terrible creak, it turned. I pushed the door, feeling the resistance of years without use. Finally, with one last effort, it opened to the night air. A small opening, but enough for me to pass through. At that moment, I heard voices coming from the house. My father had returned, and he wasn't alone. I recognized Pastor Ansell's grave voice. There was no more time. I extinguished the lantern and squeezed through the opening, feeling the fresh night air on my face for the first time in days. The yard was dark, illuminated only by the full moon that hung over the Ohio River. Crouched like a hunted animal, I ran to the back fence. It was too high to jump, but there was a hole where the neighbor's dog used to pass through. I forced myself through it, tearing my dress and scratching my skin, but I felt no pain. I only felt the desperation of escape. The streets of Riverton were almost deserted at that hour. Some drunks staggered back from the port. A dog barked in the distance. I kept to the shadows, running as fast as I could toward the market where Miss Harriet lived. When I finally arrived, I was breathless and trembling. I knocked lightly on the back door, afraid someone might see me. After a moment that seemed eternal, the door opened. Miss Harriet was there, as promised, her eyes worried as she pulled me inside. "My Lord in heaven," she whispered, seeing my condition. "What did that demon do to you?" I couldn't answer. I just collapsed in her arms, crying like I had never cried before. She hugged me, rocking me as if I were a small child. "It's all right now," she murmured, stroking my dirty hair. "You're safe." But I knew I wasn't. I wouldn't be safe as long as I was in Riverton, as long as my father could find me. "Mr. Theodore?" I asked between sobs. "He's waiting at the port," she confirmed. "The boat leaves in an hour. It will take you to Cincinnati, and from there you can go to Louisville." She took me to a room at the back of the house where a basin with warm water waited. She helped me wash my face and hands, cleaned the cuts and scratches with an herbal infusion that burned like fire. Then she gave me a simple but clean dress and a shawl to cover my head. "Eat," she said, offering me a plate of boiled potatoes with meat. "You need strength for the journey and for what lies ahead." While I ate, she explained the plan. Mr. Theodore would take me on the boat along with the cargo. I would hide among the sacks of merchandise. In Cincinnati, a niece of hers would receive me and help me continue to Louisville, where relatives who could shelter me lived. "And after?" I asked, the reality of my situation weighing on me. A 13-year-old girl, pregnant, without family, without money, without education. Miss Harriet held my hands firmly. "After, my child, you will find your way. Like the water of the river that always finds a passage, even among the hardest rocks." The journey on the Ohio River began that same night. Mr. Theodore hid me among sacks of beans and flour, covering me with a rough tarp. "Don't make a sound, girl," he warned in a deep voice. "There are officers and police who search the boats, and your father must be moving heaven and earth to find you." The boat was small and rocked with any movement of the water. The motor made a rhythmic noise that in other circumstances might even be relaxing. But for me, every different sound was cause for panic. Every time the boat slowed down or stopped, my heart raced, thinking it was my father's men. I spent the entire first night awake, sweating under the tarp, the strong smell of the grains making me even more nauseated. In the morning, when the boat stopped somewhere, I heard male voices approaching. "Hey there, Theodore. What are you bringing today?" asked an unfamiliar voice. "The usual, Mr. Adams. Beans, flour, a bit of leather." "Seen a girl around? 13 years old, skinny, long dark hair. The customs officer from Riverton is offering a good reward. Seems his daughter ran away from home." My blood froze. I held my breath, waiting for Mr. Theodore's response. "A girl? No, haven't seen anything, but if I hear something, I'll let you know." His voice sounded calm, natural, as if he were talking about the weather. There was a moment of silence, and I thought I heard footsteps on the boat. Were they searching? I closed my eyes tightly, praying to any saint who might hear me. "All right then," the voice finally said. "Continue your journey." The boat started moving again, and only then did I realize I had been holding my breath the whole time. When we were far away, Mr. Theodore lifted the tarp for a moment. "See that? Your father's after you. Police, officers, everyone. He said you stole money and jewelry from your mother before running away." I was horrified. "That's a lie. I never—" "I know," he interrupted me. "Miss Harriet told me everything. But that's how powerful men do it. They turn victims into culprits." Mr. Theodore gave me some water and a piece of cornbread with molasses. "Eat slowly. A pregnant stomach is sensitive, especially with this rocking." For the first time, someone was talking about my pregnancy without disgust or anger, just as a fact. I felt a lump in my throat and swallowed the tears along with the dry cornbread. The river journey lasted 3 days. 3 days hidden, only coming out at night when Mr. Theodore assured there was no one around. 3 days watching the Appalachian landscape pass by, the turtles sunning on the banks, the deer drinking water, the colorful birds flying above us. It was a vast and wild world, so different from the prison that had been my home. On one of those nights, sitting on the bow of the boat while Mr. Theodore fished for our dinner, he told me his story. He had been a soldier when young, fought in the Korean War, saw horrors that no man should see. When he returned, he discovered that his wife had died of yellow fever, and his small daughter had been taken by relatives to New York. He never saw them again. "Life is like this river, girl," he said, pulling in a silver bass that was struggling on the line. "It has calm pools, dangerous rapids, even waterfalls that seem like they're going to kill us. But the water always moves forward. Always. On the third day, we arrived in Cincinnati. The city was bigger than Riverton, with old houses of German influence and intense movement at the port. Mr. Theodore kept me hidden until nightfall, when I could finally come out. My legs were numb from being in the same position for so long, and my stomach growled with hunger. As promised, Miss Harriet's niece was waiting for us by the river. Zoe was a woman of about 40, with dark skin and kind eyes like her aunt's. She hugged me without asking questions and took me to her house, behind a bakery where she worked. "You can stay here tonight," she said, showing me a simple but clean room. "Early tomorrow, the truck leaves for Louisville. I've already arranged with the driver. He'll take you." For the first time in days, I could take a complete bath, eat a hot meal sitting at a table, and sleep in a real bed. But sleep didn't come easy. Nightmares haunted me. My father breaking down the door, dragging me back to the cellar. Garrison with that terrible smile saying, "She's mine." My mother crying, helpless. I woke up several times, screaming, sweating, my heart racing. Zoe would come, calm me down, give me lemon balm tea. "It will pass," she would say. "With time, it will pass." But I knew it wouldn't. Some wounds are too deep to heal completely. The next morning, before the sun rose, Zoe took me to the place where the truck to Louisville stopped. The driver, a bulky man named Oliver, just nodded his head when he saw me. He didn't ask questions, didn't show curiosity. He just indicated the cabin and said, "Let's go." I said goodbye to Zoe with a tight hug. "Thank you for everything," I whispered. "No need to thank me," she replied. "We women need to help each other. The world out there is too hard." The truck journey was even more difficult than the boat. The road was dirt, full of holes that made the vehicle jump and shake. Each jolt was a stab of pain in my back, in my stomach. I tried to focus on the landscape, the dry fields, the twisted trees, the yellow maples that occasionally appeared like patches of sun in the vegetation. Oliver spoke little, which was a relief. From time to time, he offered water or stopped for me to take care of necessities behind some bush. Once, he bought meat skewers at a roadside stop and shared them with me. "You need to eat right," he said. "You're eating for two." I realized that, like Mr. Theodore and Zoe, he knew about my situation. Probably everyone knew, the pregnant girl fleeing from her father. It was humiliating, but at the same time, comforting to know there was a network of people willing to help me. We arrived in Louisville at the end of the next day. The city seemed enormous to me, noisy, frightening. Houses upon houses, cars, hurried people. Oliver left me at an address in the Market District, a simple brick house with a small shop in the front that sold medicinal herbs. The sign said, "Miss Adelaide's Herb Shop." "This is it," he said. "The old lady is expecting you." I got off the truck with my few belongings, the dress Miss Harriet had given me, a bundle of food that Zoe had prepared, and a small pouch of herbs to calm the baby and strengthen the blood. When I knocked on the door of the herb shop, my heart was so tight I could barely breathe. What if they sent me away? What if it wasn't the right place? What if my father had arrived before me? The door opened, revealing a lady with white hair tied in a high bun, skin wrinkled like ancient parchment, and eyes so blue they seemed unreal. It was Miss Adelaide, Miss Harriet's older sister. She looked me up and down, evaluating. For a terrible moment, I thought she was going to close the door in my face. But then, her eyes softened. "Come in, child," she said, opening the door wider. "You've had a long journey." It was only then, stepping into that unknown house, that the truth hit me with full force. I would never return to Riverton. I would never see my mother again. I was alone in the world at 13, with a child growing inside me. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing like never before. All the terror, the pain, the humiliation I had kept inside during the escape finally overflowed. I cried for what I had lost, for what I never had, for the uncertain future that awaited me. Miss Adelaide said nothing. She just knelt beside me with difficulty because of her age and hugged me. She let me cry until I had no more tears, until my body trembled with exhaustion. "That's enough now," she finally said, her voice firm but gentle. "Crying won't change what happened. What's past is past. From today, you begin a new life." She helped me up and led me into the house. The smell of dried herbs was strong, somehow comforting. In the small kitchen, a pot was boiling on the wood stove. "First, you're going to eat. Then we'll take care of those wounds. And tomorrow—" She paused, looking at my belly. "Tomorrow, we decide what to do with this child." It was at that moment, sitting at the table in that strange kitchen, that I made the decision that would change the course of my life forever. "I'm going to have this baby," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. "And one day, I'm going to use it to destroy my father and my brother." The months that followed in Louisville were a mixture of pain and discovery. My girl's body changed every day, my belly growing as if it had a life of its own. And it did, of course. Miss Adelaide welcomed me without judgment, gave me a small room at the back of the herb shop, and taught me the craft of plants. "If you want to survive in this world, girl, you need to have a means to earn your living," she would say, as she showed me how to identify each herb, how to dry them just right, how to prepare the teas and ointments she sold. I learned about the power of golden seal to heal wounds, of ginseng for stomach problems, of witch hazel for inflammations. My hands, once delicate, gained calluses and stains, but also wisdom. And while I learned about the plants that heal the body, I tried to find something that would heal my soul. At night, alone in my little room, I would caress my belly and talk to that life. "It's not your fault," I would whisper. "You didn't ask to be born like this." But at the same time, I couldn't avoid the thought that this child was my weapon, my evidence, my chance for justice. In the 5th month of pregnancy, when my belly could no longer be hidden under loose clothes, Miss Adelaide called me for a serious conversation. "Amaryllis," she said, sitting in her rocking chair with a cup of chamomile tea, "you said you want to use this child to destroy your father and your brother. What exactly are you planning?" I told her my initial plan: to return to Riverton when the baby was born, go to the town judge, show the child as proof of what my brother had done, demand that he be imprisoned. Miss Adelaide listened in silence, her blue eyes fixed on me. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "My child, you are brave, but you still have much to learn about how the world works." She took a sip of tea before continuing. "Your father is a powerful man in Riverton. Customs officer, friend of judges and sheriffs. What do you think will happen if you show up there with this child?" My heart sank. Deep down, I knew she was right. "At best, they'll say you made it all up, that the child is from some boyfriend. At worst, well, you know your father. Do you really think he would hesitate to do something worse than he's already tried?" The tears I was trying to hold back began to flow. "So there is no justice? They simply go unpunished." Miss Adelaide set down her cup and held my hands firmly. "I didn't say that. I said your plan won't work. We need something better, something that doesn't depend on the word of a girl against powerful men." It was on that day that I met Dr. Agenor, an elderly lawyer who came to the herb shop to buy remedies for his high blood pressure. Miss Adelaide introduced me as her niece, come from the countryside. He was kind, asked about my pregnancy, commented that I seemed too young. After he left, Miss Adelaide explained to me, "Dr. Agenor is a rare man, honest and with a strong sense of justice. He was a prosecutor for many years before retiring. He knows the law like no one else." "And how can he help me?" I asked, not understanding. "He can guide us on the best legal path. Not now, not yet, but when the time is right." The weeks passed. My belly grew, as did my determination. I began to study. Miss Adelaide hired a retired teacher, Miss Teresa, who came 3 times a week to give me lessons. "Knowledge is power," insisted Adelaide. "An educated woman is a woman no one easily deceives." It was Miss Teresa who first told me about official documents. America is a country of papers, she explained. Whoever controls the documents controls the official truth. This idea planted a seed in my head. Documents, written evidence. Something neither my father nor my brother could deny. In the 7th month of pregnancy, I began to have problems. Strong pains, bleeding. Miss Adelaide called a trusted midwife, Mrs. Norma, who examined me carefully. "The girl is too young, her body isn't ready," she explained to Miss Adelaide, as if I weren't present. "And there is much suffering here, much anguish. The baby feels this." I was forced to stay on absolute bed rest. Lying in that bed, with nothing to do but think, my plan began to take more concrete form. On May 10, 1963, after a difficult labor that lasted almost 20 hours, I gave birth to a boy. A small baby, but with strong lungs that announced his arrival to the world with a vigorous cry. When they placed him in my arms, I felt a confused mixture of emotions. Love, yes, for that innocent little being, but also fear, sadness, and a fierce determination. Looking at his little red face, I swore that he would never go through what I went through, that he would never know the monster that was his biological father, and that he would, instead, be my tool of justice. "I'm going to call him Justin," I announced to Miss Adelaide, who smiled at the choice. "A good name, that carries justice in its very meaning." In the weeks that followed, as I recovered and learned to be a mother, at 14, still a child myself, I continued to mature my plan. Finally, when Justin turned 2 months old, I asked Miss Adelaide to invite Dr. Agenor for dinner. That night, after we ate the stew that Miss Adelaide prepared, I told my whole story to the lawyer. Without omitting any painful detail, from the first night's Garrison entered my room to the desperate escape on the Ohio River. Dr. Agenor listened to everything in silence, his face becoming increasingly grave. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. "In 40 years of practice, I've seen many atrocities, but this—" He shook his head. "What do you want from me, Amaryllis?" "I want justice," I answered simply. "I want my father and my brother to pay for what they did. Not just to me, but to my mother, too. And I want my son to be registered correctly." "Registered correctly? What do you mean?" "I want his birth certificate to show who the true father is. Garrison Thornfield, my brother." Dr. Agenor pondered for a moment. "That would be highly unusual and complicated. In most of these cases, the child is registered only with the mother's name or with the name of some other man who agrees to take on paternity." "No," I insisted. "I want the truth on the document. It's my right and my son's." "The problem," explained the lawyer, "is that without the father's presence or his written consent, we would need a process of paternity investigation. And even then, it would be your word against his." It was then that Miss Adelaide, who had been silent until then, intervened. "And if we had more than just her word?" "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Agenor. "Her mother. If we could get a statement from her mother." My heart raced. My mother? But how? She would never leave Riverton. She's too afraid of my father. "Maybe she doesn't need to leave," suggested Dr. Agenor thoughtfully. "A written statement, notarized. But even so, it would be risky for her." I thought of my mother, of her sad eyes, of how she always suffered silently. "She would do this for me," I said with conviction. "If she knew I was alive, that I have a son, that there is a chance for justice, she would find courage." "There's something else," added Miss Adelaide. "Amaryllis isn't the only victim in that house. Her mother has also suffered abuse for years. If we could document that, too—" Dr. Agenor began making notes in a small notebook he took from his pocket. "We're talking about multiple crimes. If we can gather enough evidence, we can open a criminal case." "And then?" I asked anxiously. "Then," he said, looking at me seriously, "your father and your brother could be imprisoned for many years." A wave of relief swept through me, immediately followed by fear. But how do we do this without putting me in danger? Without putting my mother in danger? We have to be very cautious and strategic, replied Dr. Agenor. First, we need to contact your mother somehow. Then, gather all possible documentation. Justin's birth record, your own record, sworn statements, medical evidence of the premature birth that confirms the date of conception. And most importantly, added Miss Adelaide, we need a sheriff or prosecutor in Riverton who isn't on your father's payroll. In the weeks that followed, our plan took shape. Dr. Agenor mobilized old contacts from the district attorney's office. We discovered that a new prosecutor had been assigned to Riverton, a young recent graduate named Edward Bridges from Boston, with no local connections that could be exploited by my father. The biggest challenge was to contact my mother without alerting my father. The solution came through an unlikely connection. Mrs. Norma's son, the midwife, was a truck driver and regularly made the Louisville-Riverton route. He agreed to take a letter there and deliver it directly to my mother when my father was at the customs office. I wrote the letter with my heart in my hand. I told about my escape, about Miss Adelaide, about Justin's birth. I spoke about the plan to seek justice and how we needed her testimony. At the end, I placed a small photo of the baby that Miss Adelaide had taken with her old camera. 2 weeks later, the truck driver returned with a response. A short note, written in haste, but one that would change everything. My darling daughter, thank God you are alive. The baby is beautiful. I will do whatever is necessary. Your father travels to Louisville next week for a 3-day meeting. It's our chance. With love, Mom. That little piece of paper was all I needed. The wheel of justice was finally beginning to turn. Today, when I dive into the crystal clear waters of Blue River here in Crystal Springs, I still feel that same sensation of freedom that I experienced more than 60 years ago, when I fled on the Ohio River. Water has always been my salvation, my path to a new life. Perhaps that's why I became the Water Witch, because in the depths of the rivers I found not only colorful fish and hidden caves, but also the peace I sought for so long. The path from Louisville to here was long and not always easy. After we achieved justice, yes we did, my dears, I stayed in Louisville for a few more years, helping Miss Adelaide in the herb shop and raising my Justin. He grew up strong and healthy, without ever knowing the horror of his origins. To him, I only told that his father had died before his birth, which, in a way, was true. The Garrison I knew died for me the day I left Riverton. My mother, brave as I never imagined she could be, not only provided her testimony to Prosecutor Edward Bridges, but also gathered physical evidence. Letters my father wrote mentioning his plan to eliminate the family's shame, clothes of mine stained with blood that she had hidden, even a diary she kept in secret for years recording the abuses we both suffered. The trial was a scandal in Riverton. The customs officer, a respected man, and his son, future Army officer, exposed as the monsters they truly were. My father was sentenced to 20 years in prison for attempted murder, unlawful imprisonment, and complicity in my brother's act. My brother got 15 years for what he did to me. I didn't need to return to Riverton. My testimony was taken in Louisville and sent to the court. Justin was officially registered with Garrison's surname, a permanent proof of his crime. My mother finally had the courage to separate from my father. She came to live with us in Louisville for a while, but the trauma she lived through was too deep. Her health was never the same. She passed away 5 years later, but at least she spent those last years in peace, knowing her grandson, free from the terror she lived for decades. When Justin turned 10, I decided it was time to start fresh somewhere else. Louisville held too many memories, some good, many painful. It was then that I met Durrell, a kind widower who worked in ecotourism. We met at a fair where I sold my herbs. He was looking for natural remedies for his back pain after years of guiding tourists through the Kentucky wilderness. Our friendship grew slowly and blossomed into love. A quiet, respectful love, so different from everything I knew in childhood. When he proposed marriage, I was honest about my past. To my surprise, he didn't back away. "What matters is who you are now, Amaryllis," he told me. Durrell had plans to move to Crystal Springs, a little town still little known at the time, but which he believed had potential for tourism because of its transparent rivers and caves. We moved in 1976 when Justin was 13 years old. At first, it was difficult. We opened a small inn at the entrance to town with only 4 rooms. I continued with my work with herbs, making home remedies for local residents. Justin adapted well. He was an intelligent, studious boy and had Durrell's good heart, who raised him as his true son. It was Durrell who taught me to swim. I, who grew up on the banks of the Ohio River but had never really entered the water beyond the edge, discovered a new world. "Water cleanses the soul," he used to say. And it was true. Every time I dove into Blue River, I felt the pains of the past dissolving, being left behind. When tourism in Crystal Springs began to grow, in the 90s, Durrell was one of the pioneers to offer river-floating tours. I helped at the reception for tourists, preparing special teas for those who returned tired from the tours. Justin, already an adult, graduated in biology and began working with research and environmental conservation. Durrell left us in 2005 after a massive heart attack. He was 72 years old and died doing what he loved. He was returning from a dive in Silver Creek when his heart simply stopped. It was an immense pain, but different from those old ones. It was a clean pain, if that makes sense. The pain of losing someone you love, not the pain of being betrayed by someone who should protect you. After he was gone, I thought about stopping with the dives. After all, I was already 56, an age when many people don't even think about getting in the water. But it was precisely diving that saved me from depression. The clear waters of Crystal Springs called me, as if Durrell was there, waiting for me. At 60, I decided to officially train as a diving instructor. I was the oldest student in the course. The instructor was young enough to be my son. But I completed all the requirements, and to the surprise of many, I became the first senior woman certified for diving in Crystal Springs. Today, at 76, I still dive regularly. My joints aren't what they used to be, and I need help putting on the equipment. But in the water, I'm as agile as a 30-year-old. I take small groups, usually older people who, like me, discovered that it's never too late to start something new. Justin got married, gave me 2 wonderful grandchildren, Tyler and Lily, who are now adults and have their own children. My youngest great-grandson, Aaron, is only 5 years old and already asks me to teach him to dive. I tell him he needs to grow a little more, but I already take him to swim in the shallow water, showing him the little fish that come to eat from our hands. My house is still that farm near Blue River. The inn was sold years ago when I decided to dedicate myself exclusively to diving and underwater photography. The walls are filled not only with photos of fish and caves, but also of my family. The family I built with love, not the one that was imposed on me by blood. And you know, my dears, when I look back at everything I've lived through, I no longer feel anger or bitterness. Time and waters washed away those feelings. What I feel is gratitude for having survived, for having had the strength to start over, for having found peace in these crystal-clear waters of Crystal Springs. My dear ones, when I look at the surface of the water before diving, I see my reflection. A lady with white hair, face marked by time, but eyes still alive, full of purpose. Underwater, however, age doesn't matter. It's as if time stops, as if past and future dissolve, and there's only that perfect moment of communion with the universe. That's how I learned to deal with my story. Diving into it when I need to, but also knowing how to return to the surface, breathe the pure air of the present. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start anew each day. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. If you're going through something similar to what I experienced, or know someone who is suffering in silence, remember, in the deepest darkness, Our inner light never goes out. It seems impossible to believe this when we're in the midst of suffering, I know. I too thought I would never see light again when I was locked in that cellar. But even there, even in that terrible moment, a small flame of hope remained lit. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. It was that dignity that made me seek justice, not just revenge. It was that dignity that allowed me to raise my son with love, despite how he was conceived. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. 60 years ago, I was just a frightened girl fleeing down the river. Today, I am a woman who dives in deep waters, who photographs hidden beauty, who teaches others to see the submerged world. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. Each dive I take is a celebration of my hard-won freedom. Each time I hold my great-grandson's hand and show him a colorful fish, I am rewriting my story. My experience has taught me that our story doesn't end with the painful chapters. There is always a new page to be written, a new river to be explored, a depth not yet visited. So, my dear ones watching, if you are going through difficult times, remember, we are like water. We can be contained for a time, but we always find a way to flow again. We can be turbid because of life's storms, but we end up clearing and reflecting the sky again. And please, if you know someone who is suffering abuse, don't close your eyes. A word of support, an extended hand, can be the difference between despair and hope. In any country, in any culture, there are organizations prepared to help. Seek information about protection in your region. Dignity and respect are universal values, no matter where you are. Subscribe now to this channel and hit the bell to not miss stories like mine. Each testimony of overcoming can be the light that guides someone in the turbulent waters of life. By subscribing, you not only support this work, but help form a protection network for so many people who, like me once, feel they are drowning in despair. And tell me here in the comments, which part of my story touched your heart the most? Was it my escape down the river, my fight for justice, or perhaps my discovery of diving in my senior years? Sharing our reflections creates a community of support where we can all learn and grow together. Do it now. Don't wait even one more minute. Because life, my dears, is like a river. It may have dangerous rapids, but it always, always continues to flow toward the sea.